For weeks, social media had been buzzing with uncertainty, confusion, and whispers of fear. Was 1,000-pound sisters over? Was TLC quietly pulling the plug? The silence from the network felt unusual. Fans waited for weeks after the season's 7 finale in June, checking Instagram, YouTube, and Reddit every day, only to find nothing official.
No anunciante, no teaser, no reneval, no cancellation. Just a strange, unsettling silence.
The fanbase didn't handle silence well. The Slaton audience had grown used to chaos, drama, wedding surprises, surgery complications, hospital emergencies, legal issues, breakups, reconciliations, and emotional transformations. So when nothing happened, that became the biggest story of all. Viewers began asking the same question over and over. Where are Tammy and Amy? Why isn't TLC saying anything? Some fans assumed the worst. TLC must have canceled it. One person commented under Amy's TikTok live stream. Others blamed the controversies, the personal setbacks, or the cast's mental health. Some believed Tammy was tired of being filmed and wanted to step away entirely now that she had finally found love and regained control of her life. Others speculated the show was too expensive now that multiple cast members needed travel, separate filming crews, and scheduled medical follow-ups. But then, the rumors shifted. A blurry photo popped up online. At first, people thought it was fake, but then more photos surfaced. The now famous Reddit thread exploded with thousands of comments after a user shared images of Amy Slaton and her new husband Brian Lavorne walking down a New Orleans street, followed by cameras, microphones, and production staff. The caption said it all. They're filming. I saw them today. That single sentence sent shockwaves through the fandom. People zoomed into the picture looking for confirmation. A mic pack, a lighting assistant, a boom pole, anything. And it was all there. Fans circled evidence in red and reposted the images everywhere. Facebook groups, subreddits, Twitter threads, and YouTube commentary channels. Then came the second account. Another Reddit user from a completely different location posted, "They filmed in my town last week." A third person added, "I live near their area. I saw production vans at Amy's house 3 days ago." That's when the panic turned into hope, and hope turned into excitement. People began to speculate not if Season 8 was coming, but what Season 8 would be about. Because the cast was not in the same place they were when Season 1 aired. So much had changed. So much had happened. Tammy had gone from nearly losing her life at 725 pounds to losing over 500 pounds and stepping into a version of herself she once thought she would never meet. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She was falling in love again. Publicly, openly, fearlessly. Amy had gone through heartbreak, healing, chaos, new beginnings, and a brand new marriage. She wasn't the same scared woman viewers saw crying in the bathroom mirror during Season 1. Now, she was a mother of 2, a woman rebuilding her life, fighting for control, and reclaiming confidence in her body. Fans had watched these moments unfold in real time on social media. The breakups, the engagements, the surgeries, the physical transformations, the emotional breakthroughs. Somewhere along the way, the show stopped being just entertainment. For thousands of viewers, it became personal, a reflection of struggle, survival, and possibility. So when people realized the cameras were rolling again, something inside the fanbase reignited. Viewers who once assumed the journey was ending suddenly found themselves excited for what came next. Because now the storyline wasn't just about weight loss. Now it was about love, new marriages, second chances, surgeries, recovery, quitting vaping, raising children, identity, mental health, and life after transformation. The story wasn't ending. It was evolving. And somewhere in Kentucky, behind a closed door, away from cameras for the moment, Tammy Slaton smiled at her reflection in a mirror she once hated. For the first time in her adult life, she recognized the woman staring back. The hallway outside Amy's son's hospital room felt colder than it should have. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, and every footstep echoed like the building itself was holding its breath. Amy leaned against the wall, hands trembling, trying her best not to cry again, but her eyes were already red and swollen. Tammy slowly rolled forward in her wheelchair, watching her sister carefully. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Amy shook her head.
No.
"No, I'm not. I'm trying, but I feel like everything's falling apart at once. My baby's in there hooked up to machines, and the doctors keep saying we're monitoring him like that's supposed to calm me down." Tammy nodded softly. "I know. And I hate seeing you like this." Amy swallowed, her voice cracking. "Every time I walk into that room, all I can think is what if something happens and I ain't there? What if he wakes up scared and I'm not holding his hand?" Tammy reached out and placed her hand over Amy's. "You are here," she said firmly. "You haven't left his side. You're doing everything you can." Amy let out a shaky breath. "I feel guilty." "For what?"
Tammy asked.
"For everything," Amy whispered. "For the stress, for the doctors asking me questions I don't have answers to, for not being strong enough right now. For not seeing this coming." Tammy gently squeezed her hand. "Listen to me.
Kids get sick.
It ain't your fault." Amy finally let out a sob she had been holding in for hours. She covered her face, trying to muffle the sound, but Tammy heard it. Every ounce of fear and exhaustion. Just then, the hospital door swung open again. The same young nurse stepped out, clipboard in hand. Her expression was serious but calm. "Miss Slaton," she said. Amy immediately straightened, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "Yes? What's going on now?" The nurse softened her tone. "We've given him another medication to help stabilize his breathing. His numbers are fluctuating, but he's showing some response. That's a good sign." Amy blinked. "Some response? That means what? He's okay? He's improving?" "It means we're moving in the right direction," the nurse replied. "But we still need more time." Amy nodded slowly, trying to absorb every word. The nurse added, "We'll be back in about 20 minutes with an update. You can go back in if you'd like." As the nurse walked away, Amy exhaled, not calm, but slightly less terrified. "I'm going in," she said. Tammy nodded. "I'll be right here when you come back out." Amy turned slowly and walked back into the room. The moment she stepped in and saw her son, small, fragile, hooked up to wires and monitors, her heart squeezed painfully. She pulled a chair close to the bed and gently took his tiny hand. "Baby," she whispered softly. "I'm right here. Mommy's not going anywhere. You fight, okay? Just keep fighting." The machines beeped steadily, a rhythm that Amy desperately hoped meant life and improvement. She leaned forward, resting her forehead gently beside his hand. "I don't care what happens or how long this takes," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." And for the first time in hours, maybe the first time all day, Amy allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things might get better. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Amy stayed beside her son, holding his hand and watching every tiny movement, even though most of the time, he barely moved at all. Every breath he took felt like a miracle, and every pause between breaths felt like a warning. A soft knock broke the silence. It was Chris. He stepped into the room slowly, his shoulders slumped, his eyes tired, as if the weight of the world sat on top of him. He wasn't his usual cheerful, joking self. Today, his face showed fear, something no one was used to seeing from him. "You okay if I sit a minute?" he asked softly. Amy nodded without looking up. "Yeah." Chris pulled up a chair, his movements careful and stiff, as if even sitting hurt. Amy finally glanced over, and she noticed he looked pale.
Sweaty.
Exhausted. "You don't look good," she murmured. Chris forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, well, hospitals ain't exactly my favorite place." Amy watched him closer. "No, Chris. I mean it. You look sick." He sighed, a long, heavy sigh. The kind someone releases when they've been holding a secret for too long. "I was waitin' for the right time," he muttered. "But I guess there ain't ever a good time when life keeps punching everybody in the gut." Amy turned fully toward him now. "Chris, what's going on?" Chris rubbed his face with both hands before answering. "I've been having those stomach pains again," he admitted. "Bad ones. And I've been throwing up blood." Amy froze. "Why didn't you tell anybody?" Chris shrugged weakly. Didn't want to worry you. You already going through enough. Amy shook her head, voice trembling. That doesn't mean you suffer alone. Chris's eyes got glassy. Not quite tears, but close. I went to the doctor, he finally confessed. They found something, and they want me to do more tests. Amy swallowed hard. What kind of tests? Chris looked down at the floor. Cancer tests, he whispered. The air left Amy's lungs. Chris continued, voice breaking just slightly. They think it might be stomach cancer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was too much. Too heavy. Too cruel. Amy shook her head slowly, as if refusing to let the words sink in. No, Chris. You just had surgery. You lost weight. You got healthy. You did everything right. This ain't fair. Chris let out a hollow laugh, not from humor, but from exhaustion. Yeah, he said quietly. Life don't care if things are fair. Amy suddenly stood up and wrapped her arms around him. Chris didn't resist. He just leaned into her, like someone finally too tired to stand on their own. You're not going through this alone, Amy whispered fiercely. Not again. Not ever. Chris nodded, voice barely audible. I know. I'm scared, Amy. Amy squeezed him tighter. Me too. But we'll face it together. The machines continued beeping in the background, one child fighting to get better, while another fight was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, this family wasn't just battling weight. They were battling fate. Hours passed, but they felt like days. Amy sat between her son's hospital bed and Chris's chair, glancing between the two people she loved most, one fighting a silent battle, and another just discovering his. At one point, the nurse stepped in to check vitals. His numbers are improving, she said softly. He's responding to treatment. Amy's shoulders finally lowered a little, relief washing across her face. But before she could fully breathe, her phone buzzed. It was Tammy. Amy hesitated, then answered. Hey, she whispered. Tammy's voice came fast, panicked, emotional. Amy, what's going on? I heard from someone online that y'all are at the hospital. Why didn't you tell me? What happened? Amy closed her eyes. She wasn't ready to repeat the story again, but she also knew Tammy wasn't someone she could hide things from anymore. Baby's sick, she said softly. Really sick. But he's stable now. Tammy exhaled shakily. Oh, thank God. I swear, I've been pacing my house like a crazy person waiting for you to answer. Amy tried to smile, but it faded quickly. There's more, she whispered. Tammy instantly knew. Her tone softened, soft in a way Tammy rarely was. Talk to me. Amy glanced at Chris. He's been having symptoms again. The doctors are testing him for cancer. There was silence. A long, emotional silence. Then Tammy spoke, voice cracking. No. Not after everything he's been through. That ain't right. Amy nodded, tears returning. I know. Tammy's voice wavered but turned sharp, determined. Where are y'all? I'm coming. Amy blinked. Tammy, you don't have to. I ain't asking, Tammy interrupted. Family shows up. And I'm showing up. Amy couldn't help it. She smiled through her tears. A few minutes later, she hung up the call. Chris rubbed his eyes. She didn't take it well, did she? Nope, Amy replied. But she's coming. Chris groaned. Well, that means at least 3 nurses are about to get yelled at. Despite everything, Amy laughed, and so did Chris. For the first time that day, the room didn't feel heavy. 30 minutes later, the sound of someone arguing outside filled the hallway. It was unmistakable. Tammy had arrived. Oh Lord, Chris muttered. Here we go. A moment later, Tammy burst through the door, breathless, emotional, and already dramatic. She rushed to Amy first, hugging her tightly. Then she turned to Chris. Her tough expression melted. You better not be giving up, she snapped, but her voice shook with love. Chris smirked slightly. I ain't going nowhere. Tammy nodded firmly. Good. Because I already lost my old life. I ain't losing family. Amy felt her chest tighten. In that moment, with hospital lights buzzing overhead, medical machines humming, and fear still lingering. Something else existed too. Strength. Unity. Unbreakable loyalty. For years, their story was about survival, weight loss, and health battles.
But now?
It was about family fighting together. No matter how messy, no matter how painful, no matter how scared they were. This wasn't the end. It was just another chapter. By the time midnight hit, the hospital had quieted down. Hallway lights dimmed, machines beeped steadily, and the chaos of earlier felt distant, like a storm that had passed but left flooding behind. Amy sat in a recliner beside her son's bed, gently brushing his hair with trembling fingers. His breathing was steadier now, his face calm, finally resting after hours of distress. Chris shifted in his chair, wincing slightly. Tammy noticed immediately. "You need anything? Water? Blanket? Will the whole vending machine in here?" She asked in that half-serious, half-threat tone she used when she cared. Chris chuckled weakly.
No, sis. I've fine.
But he didn't look fine, not even close. Amy leaned back and exhaled long and deep. "Tonight don't even feel real," she whispered. "I went from planning tomorrow's grocery run to sitting here scared out of my mind." Tammy nodded, staring at the floor. "That's how life works," she murmured. "One second you think you got everything figured out, then everything changes." For a while, no one spoke. Silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, shared, powerful. Eventually, Tammy sat beside Chris and spoke softer than anyone expected. "Do they know anything yet?" Chris rubbed the back of his neck. "Not really. They ran labs, scans. I guess we'll know more tomorrow." Tammy swallowed hard. "You really think it's cancer coming back?" Chris hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know, but the pain feels familiar." Those words hit Amy and Tammy like a punch. Amy's eyes filled again, and her voice cracked. "We can't go through that again. We already watched you fight once. We almost lost you then." Chris reached out and squeezed her hand. "But I made it through. And if I gotta fight, I'll fight again." Tammy sniffed, wiping her eyes quickly like she didn't want to be seen crying. "You better. Because me and Amy ain't strong enough to bury you. And even if we were, I'd still drag your ghost back just to yell at you." Chris actually laughed, a real laugh. And Amy's heart eased a little more. Moments later, a doctor walked in, clipboard in hand, calm but serious. Everyone straightened, breath held. The doctor glanced at Chris first. "We got some results back," he said gently. "It's too early to confirm anything, but the room froze." Amy gripped her chair. Tammy's eyes locked on the doctor, like she could read the words before he spoke them. Chris stared straight ahead, bracing. The doctor continued, "There are abnormalities we need to investigate further. We're scheduling a biopsy first thing in the morning." Amy's heart sank. Tammy clenched her jaw. Chris swallowed hard. The doctor placed a hand on Chris's shoulder. "I know this is scary, but you've been through worse and you fought hard. Don't lose hope." Amy nodded shakily. "Thank you," she whispered. As the doctor left, silence filled the room again, heavier this time. But then, slowly, Chris spoke, voice quiet but steady. "You know what? I ain't scared." Amy and Tammy looked at him, confused. Chris smiled faintly. "I survived life, weighing over 400 pounds. I survived surgery. I survived almost dying. I survived myself. And if this is another fight, then I'm ready." Tammy leaned forward. "And we're fighting with you," she whispered. Amy nodded fiercely, wiping her face. Every step. The three of them weren't just siblings anymore. They were survivors. They were a team. They were a family refusing to break, no matter what came next. And somewhere deep inside, under fear, pain, and exhaustion, hope flickered. Small, but undeniable. The next morning came far too quickly. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered on as nurses and staff moved through the halls with clipped steps and quiet urgency. The atmosphere was nothing like the night before, calmer, but somehow heavier, like the air itself understood the day ahead. Chris was already awake when Amy and Tammy opened their eyes. He sat upright in his hospital bed, staring out the window at the pale morning sky. "You sleep at all?" Tammy asked, stretching and grimacing from sleeping in a chair all night. "A little," Chris replied softly. "Mostly just thinking." Amy rubbed her eyes and yawned. "Thinking about what?" Chris shrugged one shoulder. "Life. The kids. Amanda. The show. How fast everything changes." Tammy nodded in agreement. "Feels like every time things start looking normal, something comes out of nowhere and knocks us sideways." A nurse stepped in with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Chris. We're prepping you for the biopsy in about 45 minutes. You'll be sedated, so don't worry." Chris nodded slowly, but Amy could see his hands tremble slightly. Tammy reached over and squeezed his arm. "You got this, big brother." Chris smirked faintly. "Yeah, I know." When the nurse left, the three sat in a thick silence until Amy finally whispered, "You want us to call Amanda?" Chris took a long breath. "No, not yet. Let's wait until we know something for sure. No point scaring her before we have answers." Amy nodded, even though she didn't like it. "Okay, whatever you need." A few minutes later, as Chris signed medical paperwork, Tammy paced the room. She wasn't crying now, she was angry. Angry at fear. Angry at uncertainty. Angry at life for always testing them. "This ain't fair," she muttered. "You did everything right. You lost weight. You changed your life. Why you gotta fight again?" Chris looked up at her with calm eyes. "Tammy, nobody gets through life without battles. We all get ours. Some people just get theirs louder and uglier." Tammy stopped pacing. Her stubborn walls cracked just long enough for vulnerability to show. "I ain't ready to lose family again," she whispered. "You won't," Chris reassured. "I promise you. I'm not done living." A few minutes later, a hospital transporter arrived to take Chris to the procedure room. As they wheeled him out, Amy held his hand tightly. "We'll be right here when you wake up." Chris gave her a soft smile. "You better be. If I wake up alone, I'm haunting both of y'all." Tammy rolled her eyes. "Boy, please, you better wake up breathing before you start talking about ghosts." And then he was gone down the hall. Amy and Tammy stood quietly, watching the elevator doors close, sealing him away from their view and into uncertainty. For the next hour, time moved painfully slow. Amy scrolled her phone, pretending she wasn't checking it to distract herself from crying. Tammy stared at the floor, tapping her foot, arms crossed tight across her chest. Finally, the doctor returned. His face didn't reveal anything, which made their hearts pound harder. "He did well," the doctor said gently. "The biopsy is complete. He's in recovery now, and he'll be awake soon." Amy exhaled in relief. Tammy's shoulders sagged. "But," the doctor added, carefully choosing his words, "it will take several days for results. Once we have them, we'll talk treatment options if necessary." That word, "if," was both terrifying and hopeful. When they were finally allowed back into the room, Chris looked groggy but conscious. Amy rushed to his side. "You okay?" Chris blinked slowly, then mumbled, "Y'all better not have touched my jello while I was gone." Tammy laughed through tears she refused to admit were there. "Lord, even sedated, you still thinking about food." Chris smiled weakly. "I'm still me." And somehow, that one sentence brought more comfort than any medical update ever could. For now, they didn't have answers. But they had each other. And sometimes, that was enough to keep breathing one moment at a time. The hours after the biopsy moved slowly, but the fear that had been crushing their chests softened just enough for conversation to feel normal again. Chris rested with his eyes half open, still fighting the sedation, while Amy and Tammy sat nearby. A nurse came in with a small tray and placed it gently on the bedside table. "Clear liquids only for now," she reminded with a patient but amused tone. "No cheeseburgers yet." Chris groaned dramatically. "You're all trying to starve me." Tammy rolled her eyes. "Boy, you just got done having a camera shoved into your stomach. You should be grateful they even trust you with water." Amy snickered, then quickly wiped her eyes. Laughing felt good. Too good, after the last 24 hours of fear. Chris reached for the jello with shaky fingers, But before he could grab it, Tammy stepped in and helped him. "It's okay," she murmured, almost gentle. "Just take your time." Chris paused, staring at her. "You acting all soft now. Should I be worried?" Tammy smacked his leg lightly. "You shut up. I can be soft." Amy grinned. "No, you can fake soft. There's a difference." Even Chris laughed at that, a small, tired laugh, but a real one. For a moment, the hospital room didn't feel cold or sterile. It felt like home. Chaotic, loud, sarcastic, but full of love. Hours later, after Chris fell into a deep sleep, Amy stepped out into the hallway to take a call. Tammy stayed inside the room, arms crossed as she stared at her brother. Her expression wasn't anger this time. It was fear disguised as strength. She walked to the edge of the bed and whispered quietly, almost like a prayer. "You better fight. You fought too damn hard to get here." Amy returned, her face pale, her voice shaky. It was Amanda. Tammy immediately stiffened. What did she say? She was asking how he's doing and if she should fly in. Tammy paused, swallowing. "Well, what did you tell her?" Amy took a slow breath. "I told her yes." A silence settled between them, heavy but necessary. Neither wanted to admit out loud what that decision meant. Family didn't fly across states unless things were serious. Seconds later, Chris stirred, blinking awake. "What's going on?" he asked, voice thick and tired. Amy forced a smile. "Nothing. Just checking on you." Chris looked between his sisters, their stiff posture, red-rimmed eyes, and forced small talk. He wasn't stupid. "Y'all think I'm dying, don't you?" Amy opened her mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. Tammy, meanwhile, stepped closer and stared him down. "No, we don't think that." Her voice was steady, almost fierce. "We think you're fighting, and we're here, no matter what." Chris looked at her, then nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." It wasn't a promise, and it wasn't reassurance, but it was acceptance. A quiet understanding that whatever came next, fear, treatment, surgery, recovery, none of them would face it alone. Amy reached out and held his hand. Tammy placed her hand on top of theirs. 3 siblings, battered by life, misunderstood, mocked, filmed, and judged, but still together, still fighting, still Slaton strong. Chris exhaled softly, eyes closing again, but this time his breathing was steadier. Tammy pulled the blanket up higher around him. Amy watched the heart monitor rise and fall in rhythm and whispered, "We're not losing you. Not today. Not without a fight." The following morning, the hospital room was filled with soft sunlight spilling through the blinds, dust motes dancing in the beams. Chris lay in bed, still pale, still fragile, but with the faintest spark of his old humor flickering through his eyes. The siblings hovered nearby, a mix of fear, hope, and exhaustion etched on their faces. Amy had brought a small bag of snacks, sugar-free cookies, nuts, and some fruit, and was carefully arranging them on the tray table. Tammy sat in her wheelchair, oxygen mask in place, tapping her fingers nervously on the armrest. "You realize," Chris said, his voice hoarse, "you're treating me like a baby. I'm still the guy who makes everyone laugh at dinner." Tammy raised an eyebrow, smirk forming despite the worry. "And you think that's funny now?" Amy chuckled quietly. "Baby steps, Chris. We just want you to get stronger." Chris shook his head slightly. "Don't know why you guys are acting all nice. I've survived worse, kind of, sort of. I was the loudest one at Thanksgiving, remember? Nobody touched my plate without me noticing." Tammy leaned closer, her tone soft but firm. "You survived because we've always had your back. And now, you've got us here. No hiding, no secrets." Chris sighed, allowing himself a weak smile. "Okay, fine. But I'm still taking the first cookie." Amy laughed, offering him one with a teasing flourish. "See? You can't resist my cookies. Even when you're dying, well, sort of dying, you can't resist." The laughter, small, fragile, but real, filled the room like a warm blanket. For a moment, the fear of the diagnosis, the looming shadows of surgery, and the anxiety of the unknown faded. Later that afternoon, a doctor entered with charts in hand, the usual clinical demeanor softened by empathy. "Chris, your vitals are stable," she said, smiling faintly. "The tests came back, and we've got a treatment plan. It's aggressive, but it's possible. We'll be starting immediately." The siblings exchanged glances, relief battling with lingering dread. Tammy's hand trembled slightly as she reached for Chris. "You hear that? Possible. That's good." Amy squeezed his other hand. "Yeah, we're going to do this together."
No scary surprises.
Chris gave a weak chuckle. "Scary surprises? You mean like me falling asleep on the couch and snoring so loud it wakes the nurse?" Tammy laughed quietly, shaking her head. Exactly like that. As the treatment plan unfolded, Chris's days became a delicate balance between rest, therapy, and careful nutrition. The Slatons rotated shifts, ensuring he was never alone. Amy prepared meals that were easy on his stomach, but packed with nutrients, while Tammy coordinated schedules with a hospital staff, ensuring oxygen levels, medications, and physical therapy were optimized. The siblings leaned on each other, their usual sarcasm and teasing now tinged with a deeper sense of urgency and tenderness. Every small victory, a sip of water without coughing, a few steps in the hallway, a laugh shared, became monumental. One evening, Chris spoke softly from his bed, looking at his sisters. "You know, you both are annoying as hell, but I appreciate you. Even with the jokes and the fussing. I wouldn't want anyone else here." Amy reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from his forehead. "And we wouldn't want to be anywhere else. You're our brother." Tammy added with a wry smile, "Yeah, you're stuck with us. Deal with it." Chris laughed, genuinely, faint but unmistakable. For the first time in weeks, the hospital room felt a little less like a battleground and more like home. Days blurred into each other as Chris continued his treatment. The hospital became a strange second home, with its antiseptic smell, constant beeping machines, and the quiet hum of life continuing outside the windows. Amy and Tammy had developed a rhythm, balancing hospital visits, childcare, and their own recovery journeys. Every moment was carefully calculated, yet somehow, the chaos of the Slaton household found its way into the sterile corridors. Chris had moments of frustration. There were days when the nausea wouldn't subside, and the exhaustion made even lifting his head feel like a Herculean task. But in those moments, his sisters became his anchors. Amy would read aloud from books they had loved as children, her voice soft, sometimes cracking with emotion. Tammy would make exaggerated faces to force him into a laugh, even when tears streaked her cheeks from sheer exhaustion. One afternoon, Chris's nurse, a gentle woman named Lila, entered with a small tray of warm soup. She smiled softly, noticing the quiet determination in his eyes. "You're doing remarkably well today," she said, setting the tray on his bedside table. Chris gave a small nod, taking the spoon hesitantly. "Remarkably well, that's relative. I feel like I've been through a tornado and a hurricane at the same time." Amy leaned over, encouraging him to take another bite. "Then think of this as the calm after the storm, okay?" Tammy, sitting in her wheelchair beside him, added, "Storm or not, you've got us. Every bite, every step, we're here." For a brief moment, Chris allowed himself to relax, feeling the weight of the past months, the hospitalizations, the pain, the fear lift ever so slightly. In between treatment sessions, the sisters began to plan something that had long been a dream, a small family trip to London. Despite the weight of Chris's illness, they wanted to celebrate life, even in its fragility. Amy had received an invitation from a British television program, intrigued by the sisters' weight loss journey and resilience. The trip would cover accommodations, tickets, and all necessary expenses. The sisters were ecstatic, laughing and squealing as they imagined tea at a quaint cafe, fish and chips on the streets, and posing next to red phone booths. Tammy's headbands, 43 of them sprawled across her bed, became a subject of heated debate. Amy insisted she only needed 6 for practicality, but Tammy wanted to rotate through a dozen for maximum style. Packing for the trip became an adventure of its own. Each suitcase was weighed, repacked, and repacked again. Snacks were strategically placed to avoid extra charges, clothes carefully folded and coordinated. Despite the chaos, the sisters found moments of pure joy. They danced around the living room, twirling in glittery hoodies and oversized sweatshirts, letting laughter drown out the stress. Even Chris, though still weak, chuckled from his hospital bed when he received a FaceTime call from the sisters, showing him their emergency snack suitcase and the headband selections. "You two are ridiculous," he said, his voice rough but amused. "And yet I love it," Amy replied, tears glimmering in her eyes. The London trip represented more than just travel. It symbolized hope, recovery, and the promise of life beyond the confines of the hospital and past struggles. Each small victory, each laugh, each careful plan became a reminder that life continued, even when shadowed by illness. Chris, surrounded by his sister's determination and love, began to find strength not just in treatments, but in the joy and hope they cultivated every day. The morning of the flight arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves. Amy and Tammy double-checked their suitcases, ensuring snacks were packed, headbands in place, and tickets secured. The house was alive with the sounds of children playing, suitcases being zipped, and last-minute chaos that seemed to follow the Slaton sisters wherever they went. Chris, though still recovering, insisted on seeing them off. He wheeled himself to the front door, supported by Amy and Tammy. His face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly, but his smile was genuine. "Go enjoy this, you two," he said softly. "Bring me back a story or two. And eat some fish and chips for me." Amy squeezed his hand. "We will, Chris. And don't worry, we'll make you proud." Tammy nodded, a small tear escaping her eye. "You rest, big brother. We've got this." The drive to the airport was filled with laughter, chatter, and the occasional snack tasting. Despite the usual travel stress, there was a sense of lightness, a feeling that this trip was about living, celebrating, and reclaiming parts of their lives that illness and struggles had threatened to steal. Upon arriving in London, the sisters were immediately enveloped by the bustling energy of the city. Iconic sights, red phone booths, Big Ben, and the Thames filled their vision, but it was the small moments that brought them the most joy. Sipping tea at a quaint cafe, sampling local pastries, and marveling at the historical architecture. Amy and Tammy also participated in interviews for the British television show. They shared their journey openly. The weight loss, the struggles with body image, the loss of loved ones, and the importance of family support. Cameras captured laughter, tears, and moments of genuine vulnerability. The sisters' story resonated with many, inspiring viewers far beyond Kentucky. Evenings were spent reflecting. The sisters would sit in their hotel room, sipping herbal tea, recounting memories from home, and planning the next day's adventures. Despite the whirlwind of cameras, interviews, and sightseeing, Amy and Tammy found moments of peace together. Throughout the trip, their bond with Chris remained present in their thoughts. Though he was miles away, they knew he was cheering for them, and their shared experiences strengthened their connection. Each postcard sent, each call, each small souvenir carried the essence of love and resilience that defined the Slaton family. By the end of the trip, Amy and Tammy returned to Kentucky with renewed energy, determination, and hope. The journey wasn't just about sightseeing. It was about reclaiming their lives, celebrating survival, and embracing the future, no matter how uncertain. Amy continued her treatment for addiction and mental health. Tammy focused on maintaining her post-surgery health, and Chris found strength in knowing his family's happiness and progress. Together, they faced the challenges ahead with courage, laughter, and the unwavering bond of siblings who had survived, struggled, and thrived together. Their story was far from over, but for the first time in years, the Slaton sisters could breathe, laugh, and dream without fear.